Broadcast. I am Hate Mail. With me today we have the most famous podcaster in DC Legends, Mr. Zubaz.
Still a man without a stream, but happy to appear on everybody else's.
Are you actually planning on doing a stream eventually?
At some point, I'm still kind of getting the equipment and then figuring out like a new niche, since it seems like we have almost everything covered at this point. But if I could figure out something unique to do, I'll probably set something up.
And I don't know if you want to announce this publicly, but you're the man who famously canceled a hot date for a stream.
Did I mean? Well, yeah. It was a. Yeah, she was an attractive date. But
Did you have the date after? Without getting too personal here.
We're going this weekend apparently. So.
Did you actually tell her it was a video game podcast that you were canceling the date for?
No, I had to work. Which, I've got a busy job, so it's like pretty reasonable and believable. But yeah, I mean, in fairness, like the whole thing, like it was like a half hour away. It was raining that night. I was like, this is just going to be a mess. Why don't we just push this off? But it did allow me to appear on the draft, which was good.
And that was a good draft. For those of you who haven't seen it yet, we did upload it this morning, so it should be up. Really fun draft. Du Bois does such a good job with those.
Yeah.
High level quality. And the good thing is that I don't think you have to worry about your date hearing this inadvertently. And if she did, then she might be worth chasing.
Exactly. That's how I kind of thought about it. So.
And on a sidebar, what should we call this episode? Because we have the Burger Shack, and Burger is notoriously very busy man. Got a lot going on. So if we end up doing this episode more frequently, what would I know your cuisine, your New Orleans area, so we could call it the Fish Shack.
You'll have to think about that one a little bit. Maybe like the crawfish boil or something like that, or something related to voodoo. We'll
yeah, okay.
I'll talk to my agent, see what he recommends here.
The Oyster Bar with Zubaz?
Nice, I do like that.
I'm a big oyster guy, so I love them.
Same here.
All right, so let's get into DC Legends. And we'll start with Jericho. Why don't you give us a little bit of backstory, history on Jericho before we get into gameplay?
Yeah, Jericho's an interesting character. He came about in the '80s. Some people like him, some people don't like him. He's got a lot of firsts. Obviously one of the first mute characters in comics. One of the things that I think, because I don't just like the stories, I think about the medium and the storytelling a lot. One of the things that was very unique about Jericho, so he was actually created by the artist, George Perez, and they basically forced him, they said, listen, he's going to be a mute character. He's not going to get thought bubbles. He's not going to get speech bubbles. Everything that you do with Jericho, you are going to have to relay through his art, through his expressions, through his body language, that kind of thing. And that's a really risky thing to do in the superhero comics world. But they pulled it off. He became a very popular character. Most people know kind of his general story. He's Deathstroke's son, which was kind of the only beat that the writers gave George Perez to work with. They're like, yeah, he's going to be Deathstroke's son, and that's all you have. So interesting character. He was an artist. They kind of toyed around with him being a ladies' man in later years, kind of more obviously bisexual, which is, another wrinkle that they don't often explore in DC Comics. And then just, briefly his powers. He's got this unique power where if he makes eye contact with I'll say humanoid, because he can do aliens and stuff too. If he makes eye contact with him, he can inhabit their bodies, and he's got pretty good control over them in the same way that Deadman always had as well. The one of the differences is when Jericho takes over a body, his voice is like their voice. It's more spy-like in nature, I would say. Whereas when Boston Brand takes over a body, he usually has like Boston Brand's accent and stuff. So in the comics, they would have like a little thing where Jericho would make a little J with his hands to let the other teammates know, like, yeah, I've taken over this body now. Because otherwise, how else would you know?
I always thought he was kind of a neat character. He's not one I was super into, but I always thought he was a neat character. He was unique, which was kind of the nice thing about him.
Yeah, he's had a lot of different designs. A lot of people always kind of wrote him off because his first costume, haircut, everything was very, very different, I'll say, at the time, not super popular. And they've kind of rectified that with his appearances in the New 52 and kind of later on. They've also given him away powers. They've taken some powers. They've made him more powerful. At one point, they took away his eyes, which is pretty messed up, but he regenerated them. So he's got a lot of history. But it's always Titans related. He's like never done anything outside of the Titans.
Now, what would you say his best storyline, or if somebody wanted to read up on him, where would you point them?
I would say his best storyline is probably his first, spoiler alert for a comic for 30 years ago, like the events surrounding his first death, which is when he comes back, after he joins the Titans and he's there for a while, his body kind of gets taken over based on Trigon and that kind of thing, and he leads a pretty interesting sort of, he takes over like the wildebeests and that era of like late Titans and eventually where he begs his father to kill him is a really good storyline. They were kind of firing on all cylinders there in the early to late 80s with Jericho. In terms of recent stuff, I actually don't really love everything that they've done with him recently. But he had like an interesting role in Blackest Night as well. So if you didn't read all of the like little side stories of Blackest Night, if you only read the main Lantern story, go back and check out some of the stuff with Blackest Night.
All right, cool. And how do you think he translates into the game compared to his storyline? Do you think they did a good job with that? Just how he acts and everything.
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit in one of the chats, and I suggested that it was highly likely that they were going to give him a lot of silence mechanics. And a lot of people said to me, like, no, I don't think they're going to do that. That doesn't make sense. And sure enough, that's exactly what they did. I recognize that it's very, very difficult, right? We have a limited number of debuffs and buffs. We have a limited number of game mechanics. That being said, I still think it's a little strange, to have like a mute character, like one of his main skills be silence immunity. That struck me as just as odd, I'll say. I do, his passive with the taunt application, I like the idea of it in concept, sort of the idea that basically because he takes over a body, he can, like if somebody's invisible, sure, he can take over their body and decide, no, I'm not going to be invisible now, I'm going to be taunting now. So I thought that was clever. And, one of the things that a lot of people have to keep in mind is they used a lot of what would have made sense for him on Deadman already. And you can't just rehash that. So overall, I'd say kind of like middle ground. I don't think it was like super successful. Like this is 100% what his kit should have been, but I don't think that they missed the mark entirely.
Now, you have him geared, correct?
I do, yeah. I've been playing around with him the last day, and then I spent a lot of time on M4's stream last night watching his gameplay.
Yeah, he's what rank do you have him now?
I would have to go back. It's only maybe L1 or 2 at this point.
Okay. What do you think of him so far, just from using him?
I personally, I hate the second passive. I think it's a good one sometimes, like if you are trying to get around an enemy Barda or something. The problem is it can force you to have to attack an enemy that you don't want to attack. We've had some reports of people facing off with these bot teams, and Coda attacks your team, and all of a sudden Coda is taunting. Nobody else on the team is, and now even though under no other circumstances would you ever attack Coda, that's what you have to do now because of Jericho.
It's funny because I when I saw it was Blackfire and Jericho, obviously for those of you that are aware, I'm a big Starfire and Blackfire fan. And those are characters of, the characters in the comics I wanted to see most in game, those were the two. And so I didn't really want to be excited about Jericho, but then I saw his kit, and as everybody knows, I'm a big stun fanatic, though I'm starting to get less and less interested in that, because my main thing was I wanted characters I could use with Hawkgirl and Killer Frost, which they synergize so well. And so I'm becoming a little less, I still like stuns, it's just my favorite way to deal with problem characters, but so I saw he had a stun on his 3, I saw he had a stun on his basic, so he's already got more stuns than half the characters in the game. And so I thought he'd be really neat, and then I did like the taunting thing. I'm like, oh, this is great, whenever you want to go after Black Flash. But like you said, there is a lot of times, and it almost got me in Siege already on the first day, where I used him, and then I had to attack, I think it was Arcus, and I couldn't kill the rest of the team, and I'm like, oh crap, this could be really bad. And it just, it happens a little too often.
Right. And I was talking about it with M4 about okay, well, what if you just didn't ring it? If you left it, and even at its base level, it's still 50%. And M4 has a very different style of play than me, where he's so calculating about everything, and he's like, no, I want it to be 100% so that I know for certain that it's going to happen. But I think that there may be some people out there that prefer to just be like, okay, well, I would rather it not happen, and I'll take my dice roll of 50% and see how it goes.
See, I would never think that way either, because that is too dangerous. I'd rather just know it's always going to happen.
Yeah.
Which at least you can kind of plan around that, but even then, like you said, it is difficult.
Yeah, and I've been trying to make it work. So a lot of people know that I definitely run all Titans teams because I have fun with those, and I try to exploit a little bit of the synergy with Beast Boy and Miss Martian, especially, and that has worked pretty well for me so far. If you run an all Titans team, Beast Boy attacks basically out of turn every single turn. And then Miss Martian gives a lot of shield. So between his awareness, Miss Martian shield, and that sort of thing, you are set up pretty well on defense. So he does, he has that Titans affinity, and that's something to keep in mind for people that are always looking for those kind of synergies.
I think he's kind of fun. I do like what the thing I like most about him. And it's not something, he's not an RB5 candidate for me, even though I thought he could have been at one point, is that he is fun with characters that you normally wouldn't be able to use effectively, like Killer Croc. He's really good. He's really, shockingly good with Man-Bat.
Right. Once you just stack all those diseases, it gets out of hand really quick. And that's something that people used to do with Riddler. There is a slight difference, though, which is Jericho's taunt is a passive, so it won't trigger things like, for instance, on TDK or Man-Bat, because the taunt is not active. Whereas, when Riddler places taunt on an enemy, it will trigger those guys because it's an active move. So that's just something to keep in mind when people are looking at those synergies.
Yeah, but it's still pretty good. And the only thing is it's kind of more of a niche fun type of thing. And I'm still kind of surprised. 2D I don't think is planning on RB5ing him, which he just kind of feels right up 2D's alley with all the silence.
Yeah, between that and the Man-Bat synergy there that Tootie would be all over it. But I think Tootie might just be kind of a little played out after King Shazam last month.
Yeah, that was. I think he would have rather probably getting it. Well, he did like. I did see him in chat talking about how much he liked him with Hush.
Right.
So I guess there is some synergies there. I tried to experiment with that a little bit. Didn't really go real well. I've never been
Yeah.
a big fan of Hush, so. But I did try to play with him with Rose a little bit, and
Okay.
that didn't really do really well either.
He's got to be great with Hawkgirl, though, right?
He is pretty good with Hawkgirl. I do like him with Hawkgirl. The problem is that the biggest issue I think for him with my enjoyment of using him is that Darkseid came out, and it's just very hard to replace him. And
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the thing. Like, he has synergy with Hawkgirl because he places immunities on the team and because he stuns, but Darkseid is just going to do it better and more consistently, so why would you actually bring Jericho unless you're trying to get bonus points in Siege?
yeah, and that's. I mean, he has been pretty decent for me this siege. I mean, he has the controls. He's a solid character if you want to use him. The problem is like you said, the placing taunt can be useful, and it can also be very, very dangerous and very
Right.
bad. Um, Speaking of which, let's get into legendary order before we move on. And so what I'm thinking for him is, I liked his 2, which is his apply awareness to all allies. I actually would put that first. I find that to be the most useful ability on him, especially in Siege. What do you think of that?
Sorry, I was just looking at the toolkit real quick just to make sure that I had all of his skills down. Yeah, I think that especially for Siege, I mean, awareness to everyone in general is always going to be good. And then it was probably less that I loved that particular move and more that I just wasn't impressed with a lot of the other legendaries.
Yeah, I actually feel the exact same way, and I was kind of torn between his 2 and his 1. The problem with his 1 is that it's only 50%, which is still high
Right.
for a basic, but it's because it's not guaranteed. I kind of felt like his 2 and his 1 are kind of his bread and butter. That gets if you took him to L2, you kind of have everything you really absolutely need.
Yeah, I do know, and from watching M4s that his silence at the beginning of battle does go under like Hal Jordan's debuff immunity, that sort of thing. I know some people have had questions about that. It's just because it's a random ally and I haven't been able to figure out any consistency with it. Like sometimes it's like, oh, it's going to go on the fastest character or it's going to go on the leader or something like that. I have actually seen it go on everybody. And so it's great if it lands on Black Flash, but outside of that, I'm not sure exactly what it's doing for you.
Yeah, Black Flash, Arcus, super useful, but
Mhm.
there's no guarantee. So
Right.
I do think it's a good ability, and if you are like Tuditron and want to run a silence-based team, that might be your
Right.
first pick.
Yeah.
But it's, other than that, his 3, the additional damage, it can be decent, especially if it crits. But once again, they have to be silenced, and you kind of got to build around that.
Yeah.
And then his 4, gain silence immunity. I mean, silence. I mean, it can't. I mean, that can be nice. I'm sure at times there's going to be times where it's going to be useful, but you're never going to build a team around having somebody
No.
with silence immunity.
It does synergize with some people like a Hawk Girl or something like that. I think more than anything, though, it's like an extra buff that if somebody is purging your buffs, you're like, oh, okay, at least they can take the silence immunity, and I still have my, debuff immunity or something like that.
I know Joker wanted his apply silence to start a battle to the whole enemy team, which
Oh,
now it's a game changer. Like,
yeah.
that almost is borderline OP, but I mean it would definitely end the speed meta. But obviously they didn't think they wanted to go that route. So all right. So let's move on to my love, and that is Blackfire, which I have to say before we get into her background is her art. They did such a good job. She looks so badass.
I think so too, both on basic and legendary. I thought
Yeah,
they did a great job.
yeah. She looks fantastic. Both skins. I'm partial to her legendary, but I really like both of them.
Yeah, and they really, a lot of the time they lean heavy on the new 52, and that's where her legendary comes from. And I think they struck a nice compromise between, let's say, the scantily clad sensibilities of the new 52 with sort of modern day DCL. I think they picked a good line between the two of them.
Yeah, I think they didn't go too hard in any direction, and she just looks awesome. So I was very impressed with how they did it. And you had recommended to me, which we will be auctioning off, not on this one because I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but maybe I'll announce it on when we do a full Blackfire episode which she will be a character I will be taking RB5, so I'll probably have her RB4 on the next, well, maybe not on the Burger Shack, but once her sale comes out, she'll go RB4 that night. And so then we can give her a really proper review. But at L2, I'm really liking her. So why don't you give us a little bit of her background? You had recommended reading Justice League Odyssey Last Stand.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
So I was just curious, and then what's the storyline in New 52, which that's where I'm actually more familiar with her, because that's kind of when I got real into DC Comics.
Sure. So Blackfire's had like an interesting history, which is for probably too long, Blackfire. She was only Starfire's sister. They basically did like a light skin swap on a character and said, okay, yeah, she's the evil version, and that's it. And she did not have a lot of nuance. She was a character in the 80s that was created when like villains were villains. It was just, why are they doing this bad thing? Oh, because they're a bad person. Like that's kind of how she was for a very long time. And over time, I think they realized that they could do a little bit more with her. She got a lot more interesting, sort of kind of early 2000s. I actually really loved her battles with Hawkman and Hawkgirl. Which is like another storyline outside of what I already recommended here.
What storyline is that? I might actually order that one.
It's part of the Rand Thanagar War and Infinite Crisis or Infinity Crisis, where she kind of battles them sort of head to head, and she like takes over Rand. That's kind of stemming out of the Outsiders, is where a lot of that came from. New 52 is when they gave her a little bit more character finally, where at that point she was not just evil for the sake of being evil. That's when they added the little wrinkle that, always, it had always been, okay, Blackfire, sold Corey, sold Starfire, because that was what she did, and now it was because it was kind of to save her life actually. So she wanted to save her sister from when they were getting attacked, and there's a lot of tension, but all of a sudden it's like there's a little bit more understanding. And so New 52, she gets a lot more interesting than she had ever been. And then really it's Justice League Odyssey where I think that they've taken her to a new level, to a point now where she would even be, by some people's measures, considered to be doing heroic things at this point. She is no longer just absolute pure evil. They've kind of scaled her back and made her a little bit of an anti-hero at this point. And I mentioned it to you, but I'll mention it here as well. If anybody has not read that comic, in Justice League Odyssey, especially the last final issues, if there's a character in DC Legends that you think is wildly overpowered, like overpowered to a point where you think that they need to be nerfed, for instance, And you would say maybe like to see them get a little bit of comeuppance in a different form. Maybe read Justice League Odyssey. Maybe see what Blackfire does to a certain OP tune in that particular book.
That's great. What was the story? What was this name? Do you remember what the name of the storyline in New 52 was? I want to reread that, and I can't think of what it is. I even own it. I just gonna have to dig for it.
Let me think. I'm not sure if I know the name of it offhand, but what would that have been in? I mean, she was definitely in the Teen Titans books, or sorry, not the Teen Titans, the Red Hood and the Outlaws books, I believe, is where a lot of that came from.
Yeah, that's right.
Because that's where Starfire was. Starfire was in those Red Hood and the Outlaws books as well.
Which I really love those series. I thought that was some of my favorite New 52.
Yeah, it was very controversial at the time, basically. Because not just because of how they drew her, but they really did change Starfire's personality quite a bit. I think the interesting thing was I think that they enhanced what she had already been for a long time in the comics. The problem was that they now had all these other media properties, and people had really fallen in love with the Starfire, like the very, very young, wholesome Starfire from Teen Titans and Teen Titans Go. And so now you've got parents who are like, I want to see Starfire, and this is what you're giving me, like, for my kids. And it was like, well, it says on the cover that, this is for teens and everything. But yeah, I mean, that's sort of the issue that you run into Teen Titans with a lot, which is like, how do you balance them wanting to appeal to kids, but also wanting to do like adult themes and storylines?
Yeah, because you have the moody Robin even, just
right.
And then now he's
It's a lot different. I mean, everything was very, very different. And it was the New 52. They were deliberately trying to shake things up. So some things more successful than others, and some things more successful for certain audiences than others, I'll say.
So getting onto the character, I know you don't have her unlocked yet, of course, or geared up. To any... I only have her L2. I have seen some of Berger's L5 video, which we'll have a fair amount of video of that in this, if you're watching the YouTube version. I have her at L2. I have to say she performs extremely well at L2. I'm actually very impressed with her at L2. Her crit immunity, passive crit immunity, is fantastic. It really helps keep her alive. Which you don't normally expect an L2 character to be able to survive a Wonder Girl whip, which she absolutely can take a few hits.
Nice.
So that's nice to see. The only person that can really one-shot her, I'd say, is Darkseid, which he can one-shot any green, so that's, I'm not concerned about that. Maybe even at RB4 or RB5 she might be able to take a little bit of a hit. I'm not sure if she could take a full basic from an RB5 Darkseid, but she could at least survive a little bit. What is really impressive about her is that her 3, after she's been hit once, she basically has 8 strength ups, and she at L2 will nuke all reds, can nuke some greens, and even damage blues, which I think at RB5 she'll do massive damage. She's not going to be like an S tier character because Starfire kind of does what she does, but her friends can get hit. She doesn't gain as much, obviously, but and the enemy has to be buffed when they hit her, but who's not buffed?
Right.
And I think that's like the most rare thing. The only bad part is I thought she was going to be an amazing raid character, and then I realized they're never buffed.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
So
so far, this is one just thing that I was curious about in her kit. I'm 99% sure that I know the answer, but just curious. So it's if a buffed enemy attacks Blackfire, she gains 4 empowered strength ups. Do they have to do damage for her to gain those strength ups? Do you know?
I think I'm almost certain. Yes.
That's what I thought. I mean, that's how it reads. That's how those kits kind of read in the rest of. But you just never know. So that's the only kind of unfortunate thing that I saw. A lot of people know that I run Enchantress a lot. And Blackfire was very appealing because she has that medium overheal, which would then trigger Enchantress's AoE. But Enchantress would cripple her in the same way that, I think some of those heavy awareness stacks teams will as well.
Yeah, I'm 99.9% sure that's the case. In fact, I will test it while we're talking. But I remember I tested a whole bunch of teams, and I know it doesn't work for Starfire, but
Right.
I don't know if I tested it with specifically for her. I'm almost certain I did though, and it's
Yeah, and that's how it is for most everything. Basically, attacked means damaged. It would just, again, there's just certain comps that she won't be quite as successful in when other people are thinking about when and how to use her.
okay. Yeah, I just
oh,
tested it, and she didn't gain any.
Yeah, those a lot of people use those World Engine teams with WGD and Donna Troy, and especially in this siege when World's Greatest Detective is a bonus character. But if she's got a fat stack of awareness, she's not going to gain those empowered strength ups, unfortunately.
Yeah, so it does limit her use a little bit. She's good against shielded characters, which at first I was like, oh gosh, she's going to be like Blue Beetle. But she's... to my surprise, which I wasn't actually that excited that she had a stun, but I was like, it maybe come in use. But the great thing is that the majority of characters I hate the most, like Azrael or Arcus, they all have shields. So that surprisingly comes in use a lot more than I thought it would.
Right.
It is gated, but it's 100% stun on a basic, which isn't bad.
Right. That's always going to be really good. That'll obviously again be really good with Hawk Girl. I think in thinking about her kit with the question you asked earlier, how they do? How did they do based on her kit versus the lore? And effectively she has the same powers as Starfire. So how do you make that a little bit different? One of the things that the Tamaranians are known for is that they absorb the UV rays and then convert them into power. And I think that's what they did with her passive. So it's now, okay, so somebody's attacking them. It's sort of like she's absorbing a little bit of that energy, and that gains her the empowered strength ups, and then she shoots it right back at them. So I think that was a very, very smart move. I do think, unfortunately, the way that the game is set up, her kit really could have been Blue Beetle's kit here.
Yeah.
Which I think, the Reach, they have their long-standing feud with the Green Lanterns, and the Lanterns in this particular game are heavy shielders, so it would make sense that Blue Beetle punished shields. That's what he used to do. Unfortunately, they stripped him of that recently for unknown reasons. Maybe because they were saving it for Blackfire. I don't know. But overall, I'd say having her be critical immune and then having sort of the gaining strength ups based on enemy attacks, I think that again makes sense with the comic book lore.
Yeah, I mean, I liked the way her kit worked. I liked that it was like Starfire but physical, so it was different, where she does intelligence-based. I know some people were like, oh, maybe she should have been intellect-based. I kind of like that she's different. It just makes her unique from Starfire. And I also like her on the same team as Starfire when you're facing characters, because she'll do the extra damage to the imp-based characters and vice versa.
Right, and that's, I do think they have a lot of synergy together, and it's like, on the one hand, okay, they're enemies, but they are also sisters. Especially recently, they have fought together, which is really good. And I think one of the things to keep in mind too, we saw this with Hawk and Dove. The devs, I think, for these new characters, Hawk, Dove, Jericho, and Blackfire, I think they relied far more on the the Titans show, the live action show, than they have been on the comics. A little bit in appearance, but then, well, not for Jericho, but then certainly for their kits. That's the only explanation that Hawk and Dove are physical based. So I think that they did that with Blackfire as well. One other quick note, because I was mentioning this earlier with Jericho and his affiliation as a Titans. I don't know why, but Blackfire also has the Titans affiliation in game.
So yeah, I saw that, and I was a little perplexed myself. But
ever been a Titan, and so she has it. And then, for instance, like Red Robin and Aqualad don't. But again, you can use that with to your advantage with Miss Martian and Beast Boy, and having other fun with Titans like that.
And Wonder Girl pairs well with her, which is good and bad all at the same time.
Exactly. I'm about to see a big resurgence in Wonder Girl, it seems like, based on that era, Starfire, and then now and Blackfire as well.
And I'm sure, Terra is already so popular, and you're going to see so many Terra everywhere going forward that, Wonder Girl's, she's coming back with a vengeance.
Yep.
We'll touch on Legendary Order just briefly. I only have her L2. I took her 3 and her 1, which I think I would lean are to the 2 most important for her. That the 3, even though it's a random, apply buff immunity on a random character, it will always go to the Taunter, which if you're facing Barda, who's going to be prevalent, especially after 6th day, that's extremely useful. I've found that to be way better than I thought.
It's the best debuff in the game. I really do. So that, I'm always going to take that first wherever I see it.
So I definitely agree with that. Her 1 I actually find, like I'd mentioned earlier, I find that to be extremely useful. I think that's probably her next best skill. I could see an argument for really all the other ones, well, all but maybe her 4, unless you really want to get her Stellar Rage up faster, which, I don't know, the matches just don't tend to last long enough that you're going to use it more than once, so.
Right. What's the cooldown on that, the Stellar Rage?
It is, I want to say it's 3 turns.
Okay.
I'd have to look again. But it's 3 or 4, it's a long cooldown. So even if you are getting the extra turn, or you're getting it reduced, it doesn't feel like it comes up fast enough again.
Yeah, and I get, at that point too, it's like you've removed all of their shields basically. Using the Stellar Rage, are you gonna need to do that again? Maybe if you're against like a very, very heavy shielding teams, but those are generally not that successful. Unless you're running like RB5 lanterns like the boy, I don't know how much people get a lot of mileage out of shielding these days.
Yeah, it's 3 turns. I just looked. On another note, I just 2-manned it with Enchantress. I was testing, and her nuke just killed the entire team. I wish I would have been recording.
Nice.
And I actually didn't lose a tune on a 2-man match. So then and keep in mind, she's L2, so like I said, I'm pretty impressed. Her basic does surprisingly good damage, too.
Yeah, she seems like, and with the gear kit that she has, I think a lot people could tell that she was going to be able to do pretty good damage. And then that's 8 strength ups every time somebody attacks her. It's pretty good.
Yeah, she stacks those things up so fast.
Yeah, I'm excited to run her in a team with like either Constantine or Poison Ivy, who I both have those at high RB levels where I can put Taunt on her to actually draw in more attacks and then go from there.
Yeah, I can see that being fun. I've actually been, I think my new, because I've been telling everybody for a while, I'm going to try to possibly move off stuns and move into a new theme of some kind, and I think my theme is going to build around Blackfire. I'm going to just build characters around making her cool. This month, obviously, I'll do Starfire, I'll do Blackfire, and I'm going to do Barda, because they're already started and they're so good. But after that, I think that's what I'm going to go towards, just because she's fun. After her 2 and her 1, I really struggled to decide what I think is better. Not her 2, her 3 and her 1, because her 2 is actually surprisingly good, purging all debuffs on the main target, and then you're giving crit immunity to the entire team, and you're giving an overheal, which also works with Starfire, which is nice, and you're going to call assist from a random teammate. So that's a lot in one move. And
it is.
And a lot of times I'll find, especially if I start the match with Barda gets stunned or debuffed or something, then you can cast that, remove all the debuffs, and she's ready to go again. And now she has crit immunity and an overheal.
Yeah, that's a very potent move, and that one thing that can't be overlooked is that crit immunity is for 2 turns, which is so nice.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And then I do also her 5, gaining that 15% shield every time she's hit on top of the 4 empowered strength ups, I think will make her even more tanky, which she's pretty good for an L2 character. So you figure at RB5 and gaining a 15% shield every time she's hit, that's going to be really, really good.
Yeah. I'm looking at the DC toolkit right now too, and she has the 5th highest strength in the entire game, which is crazy. And then fifth highest pure strength, and then she starts stacking empowered strength up. So
that's nice.
A lot.
Yeah, I think she's gonna be. I mean, I don't think she's an S tier character. She probably doesn't do enough to hit that. But I think she'll probably be, what we would rank as an A tier character. And I know how much you love tier lists, but
yeah.
But I think she'll be a character that you definitely wouldn't regret investing in.
Nice.
So, well, anyway, I think any other comments to add before we move or end this, actually?
No, I think that's it. We got a real solid Titans theme month here. After we just had Hawk and Dove come out a couple months ago as well. So really, it's like almost the full roster is around at this point. Kind of waiting on Aqualad, the original Titan who's still not in the game.
They really need to do an Aqua month.
I think so too, but it's crazy to me at this point that we have Jericho and not one of the founding members of the Teen Titans, which is unfortunate. But I think they did a really great job this month. I'm excited that they patched stuff pretty quickly. When they realized that they had some errors in the kits, and it should be a good one. Hopefully, it works out well.
Yeah, because last month was, I think. Actually, my Apple Card told me how boring of a month it was by my lack of spending, which is at an all-time low in the last 2 years probably, which is still an absurd amount, by the way, but it was a pleasant number instead of, oh God, I can't believe I spent that much number.
I didn't gear either of the 2 new tunes from last month. Didn't do anything with them. So
I regret gearing King Shazam. I wish I would have made him a slow gear. I didn't gear Batman Who Laughs, who I still think he might be kind of fun. I kind of want to play with him, so he's the one I'm slow gearing now. So hope he showed up.
Him's a great effect in raids, but outside of that, I just still can't see him working.
Yeah, he was kind of disappointing. I thought he was going to be good the whole month. Oh, well, Barda was the exception. She was fantastic, right. But the rest of the month was kind of meh. But this month, I'm all back in, having a great time.
Should be good. And we've got the new Titans season comes out next month or in July as well. So
that's right. I forgot it was that soon. I'm excited for that.
Blackfire is going to be a big part of that show, and I think they did a great job with her season 3 costume. Some people have mixed feelings about the show, but I'm always kind of like, who cares? It's live action comic books. Have fun with it.
I've loved the Titans show. I mean, for a TV show, it's been very good.
I've also enjoyed it quite a bit. I think obviously there's always going to be room for criticism and stuff, but in this case, I think they do a pretty good job with it.
It's probably, especially when you compare it to like CW shows. With the exception of the new Superman, which is surprisingly good.
Yeah. I personally love Legends of Tomorrow, but the other ones I have fallen off on completely.
Yeah, I've fallen off on pretty much all of them for a long time now, but Titans I really enjoyed. So
yeah.
All right, well, we will end it there. Thank you all for listening, and stay tuned for in the next couple of weeks. I'll auction off if I ever. I mentioned the King Shazam contest quite some time ago. It has not come in from Amazon still, so I have not been able to auction it. When it does come in, after I give it a quick read, I will auction it off, and then I'll probably have numerous Blackfire. And I have a whole ton of comic books I plan to auction off, or just do raffles or giveaways or whatever, because there's a lot of stuff taking up a lot of space, and thought it'd be more fun to give it away as raffles. So stay tuned. We'll be having a lot more of those. Thanks for listening.
All right, thanks for having me.
Hi, this is Renee Sylvia 88, DC Legends moderator. Thank you for listening to this episode of WROL Broadcast. If you liked the show, please check out patreon.com/WROL Broadcast and find out how to get cool perks. Kage should really watch 2D Tune videos to learn about things.